Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I would like to ask if you would please rise as the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Regiment presents our nation's colors. Representing the reactivated 54th is the Regimental Executive Officer, Lieutenant Colonel David Henke, and presenting the colors Company A of 54th Massachusetts, commanded by Benny White.
Present arms! Color guard! Color guard! Retire! Color guard! Right! Right! Face! Clock time! Clock time! Clock! One. Forward! Forward! One. Time.
Thank you so much, and thank you, 54th Massachusetts. Welcome all to the official launch of an exciting partnership that is undertaking a $2.8 million restoration of the Shaw 54th Regiment Memorial right behind me. My name is Liz Visa, and I'm Executive Director of the Friends of the Public Garden. Since 1970, we have worked in partnership with the city to care for, renew, and protect the Boston Common, the Public Garden, and the Commonwealth Avenue Mall. We are joined today by partners in this initiative, the City of Boston, the National Park Service, and the Museum of African American History. And we are so pleased, Mayor, that you can be with us today, and that you have agreed to co-chair this committee along with Governor Baker and Robert Stanton, who is the first African American director of the National Park Service, former director, but the first one of African American descent. We also have some other committee members present, so at the end of this event, please come forward and be part of photographing the event and the signing. We're putting together a committee of descendants of the Shaw, 54th Regiment members, scholars, leaders in the African American community. We've invited some national leaders. We'll see if they respond to it, but we've had a wonderful response so far. And I want to welcome and thank so much the elected officials who are with us today. We have Representative Jay Livingstone here. Thank you, Jay, for being here. Representative Byron Rushing, a member of the committee and a longtime supporter of this Shaw and what it means. Representative China Tyler. How are you? Great. And we have several city councilors. We have Ed Flynn and Josh Zink. Let me know if I've missed any of you. So thank you so much for joining us. We will be using this major restoration project as an opportunity to engage the community in a series of programs that provoke us all to think about where we stand today on the issues of race, freedom, and justice. This is not about just reconstructing a monument. This could not come at a more important time in our turbulent moment on the national stage. This fall, we're sponsoring a community conversation with several national figures to talk about the power of monuments, what the Shaw 54th says to us today, and how monuments can be used as vehicles of communication for good as well as for ill. So stay tuned of news of those events coming up soon. You will hear more about the memorial, considered one of the nation's greatest public monuments, and the story it tells of the remarkable 54th Regiment from the National Park Service, the Museum of African American History, and the 54th. I would like to touch on the restoration history and why we need to do this major project today. Private funds built this memorial, which was given to the city on May 31st, 1897. By the late 20th century, after many decades of neglect, this is what it looked like. If you can see the poster on the far side, the top image, it was dripping green. Somebody had put an artificial floral bouquet in Shaw's arms. So in 1982, the Friends led a capital campaign to raise $200,000, at that point a very large sum of money, to restore the monument and set up an endowment for its care. And we've been partnering with the city to care for it ever since. Despite regular care, however, water has penetrated the core over time, which has led to deterioration of the monument's foundation, the brick core underneath the monument. And we discovered this in the not too distant past when we were doing some stonework on the monument. It then, therefore, makes it vulnerable to seismic events. So that has led us to this major project. We are going to be removing the bronze and all the stone from the plaza level up. So behind me, you see that wavy line, all that stone as well as the bronze is going to be removed. We're going to be installing new waterproofing under the plaza, conserving the bronze, and constructing a new concrete foundation beneath it. We're also going to be inserting a stainless steel frame between the bronze and the marble beneath so we can behind us so we can pin them together and further secure it. This will take about 5 to 6 months starting next spring. During that time, a large portion of the common behind us will need to be fenced off. So as you know, we have a huge number of people moving through the park, over 10,000 a day. So in order not to create a new path between this path and Armstrong Path, which is the next diagonal one below us, the fencing will encompass this whole area down to that. We are incredibly grateful to the National Park Service, which is bringing half the funding, $1.4 million, to this project. The City of Boston, thank you, National Park Service. The City of Boston is also making a strong statement about the importance of the Shaw 54th by committing up to $750,000 in support of this effort. And the Friends, with incredible support from a foundation, the Harold Whitworth Pierce Charitable Trust, is contributing $750,000. And I want to recognize Betsy and Jim Nichols. Thank you so much for your support. We are also raising funds to support the programs and events we have planned, and would be happy to hear from anyone who would like an opportunity to become a supporter of this initiative. So let us know if you know of anyone that would like to be part of these year and a half of events. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Marita Rivero, from the Executive Director of the Museum of African American History, who will talk about the 54th Regiment and their departure from Boston, marching down Beacon Street behind us to make history. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, and good morning. How wonderful to be here today. The north slope of Beacon Hill, kind of right over the hill behind us, was home to Boston's black community in the 1700s and 1800s. Visitors often begin their exploration of our Black Heritage Trail and the 1806 African Meeting House right here at this stunning Shaw Memorial, truly a national monument. But let's go back to the mid-1800s and the Civil War. when the Union was losing. President Lincoln responded to pressure from black and white abolitionists, including Boston's Lewis Hayden from the North Slope and Massachusetts Governor John Andrew. Their message: black men needed to fight if the war was to be won. Hayden and other black leaders were prepared to raise the first black regiment in the North. Frederick Douglass would devote himself to recruiting men from Ohio, New England, and Canada. Douglass's two sons, Charles and Lewis, joined the 54th from New York. In 1863, President Lincoln ended slavery by signing the Emancipation Proclamation, and recruitment could commence. Within weeks, near 1,000 men joined the 54th, despite the fact that were they captured, they would be enslaved or killed. Boston's African Meeting House was a recruitment center, as was Camp Meigs in Hyde Park. Black men weren't allowed to be officers, but the son of a noted abolitionist, Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, himself a veteran, accepted the command. A few months later, when the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment left Boston, it was with much fanfare and a great deal of public discourse. They paraded here on the Common, later marching up Beacon Street past this very corner on their way to Boston Harbor. There were speeches. Journalists covered the event. People lined the streets. Frederick Douglass himself was present to see the men off at Battery Wharf. As indication of the high priority placed on the formation of this regiment, noted black activist Harriet Tubman met the troops when their steamships landed in South Carolina and served them breakfast. In subsequent battles, the regiment provided without doubt their ability, their courage under fire, and their valor. This was additional cause for celebration because it changed the stereotypical and cartoonish picture of black men that had been promoted. They became so well known, they were referred to simply as the 54th. The Museum of African American History is pleased to be part of an initiative that celebrates these significant parts of Boston's rich history, that considers the value of great public art, and that speaks to the issue of our time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marita. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Brigadier General Frank McGurn of the 54th Regiment, who will talk about the regiment's historic assault on Fort Wagner and the persistent legacy of inequality.
Well, good morning, Mr. Mayor, and Superintendent Creasy, Ms. Rivero, Ms. Vizza, honored veterans and guests, and I'd like to take a second to specifically thank for joining us, but thanks for who you are to the 54th, the reenactors. You know, many of you may not realize it. As the Assistant Adjutant General of the National Guard, I served in the National Guard for 37 years, and way back in the 80s, we tried to start, we started an honor guard that could lend dignity and pay final respects to our fallen comrades. And after almost a decade, then Governor Patrick reactivated the 54th in order to serve as the state militia designation for our honor guard. And we would not have been able to do that without the help of Lieutenant Hill and the many 54th reenactors who stayed with us from thick and thin, from the very beginning to this day, and are an integral part of our Massachusetts National Guard. So I'd like to thank each and every one of the 54th. I'm humbled to join you to commemorate the 155th anniversary of the Battle of Fort Wagner. And I'm going to pause one more time because I came across something very ironic. You know, it was 155 years ago that the 54th spilled their blood at Fort Wagner in the sands of South Carolina. But it wasn't until 70 years ago, yesterday, that President Harry Truman officially desegregated the United States military. More than 90 years after this unit consecrated the combat arms with their blood. So I think it's an ironic and worthy of thought point that we still have some work to do. So I'm humbled to join you to commemorate the 155th anniversary of the battle at Fort Wagner, in which the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry Regiment forged their legacy of glory. It is certainly a fitting day to say thank you to everyone who made the refurbishment of this monument a reality. The members of the 54th served at a time when military service, like so many other elements of citizenship, was denied to African Americans. Even after President Lincoln called for troops to defend the nation in 1860, and black soldiers were recruited into the Army as more than merely laborers, many, upon joining, continued to find themselves segregated and relegated to non-combat roles. Major General Quincy Adams Gilmore, the 10th Corps commander and the commander of the Southern Department under which the 54th served, ordered his command to be integrated, and that black units were not to be assigned menial tasks. His name would be given to the Gilmore Award for Valor and struck as a medal, and 4 members of the 54th received the Gilmore Award for gallant conduct during the assault on Fort Wagner, South Carolina, where numerous members of the unit and their commander, Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, were killed. At the conclusion of the Civil War, the members of the 54th returned home to face discrimination and economic hardship in a society that had yet to begin shedding the underpinnings of white supremacy. In the 153 years since the end of the Civil War, much has changed in America and in the military. Yet we still grapple, as a nation, with the vestiges and echoes of injustice. The commitment to preserve this monument not only shows that the City of Boston and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will always remember the courage and sacrifice of the Massachusetts 54th Volunteer Infantry Regiment, but that we also remember the struggle for equality, a struggle that is ours to continue in their honor. Thank you for the privilege of joining you today, and thank you for upholding the honor and memory of the 54th.
Thank you so much, Brigadier General. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Michael Creasy, Superintendent of the National Parks of Boston, who will talk about the major role being played by the national parks and the significance of this memorial.
Thank you, Liz. Good morning. How wonderful it is to be here with friends and supporters of this incredible project to undertake a restoration of this magnificent monument. The Shaw and the 54th Regiment is one of Augustus St. Gaudens's most stirring and celebrated masterpieces, and it is considered by some to be America's greatest public monument. When dedicated in 1897, the Shaw Memorial stood alone as a monument to the true meaning of the Civil War. As Americans began to remember those years in history books, commemorations, and monuments, they deliberately focused on the mutual courage and shared sacrifice of the soldiers of both sides, while pushing the true meaning of the war further from public memory. But as Frederick Douglass said, whatever else I may forget, I shall never forget the difference between those who fought for liberty and those who fought for slavery. The Shaw Memorial does not let us forget. The day of the unveiling, the weather was overcast and light and misty rain. In spite of this, there was a festive feeling and spectators lined the streets. 2 large American flags draped the sculpture. At 11:17 a.m., 2 young nephews of Robert Gould Shaw unveiled the memorial. The crowd cheered and a band struck up the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and an artillery battery on the Common fired 17-gun salute, and from the harbor, a 21-gun salute. The military units present began to march past the memorial, led by 65 veterans of the 54th. Some of the officers wore their Civil War uniforms, while most of the enlisted men were in their best frock coats. Among the men of the 54th, appropriately, Sergeant William Carney carried the American flag. The sight of him elicited cheers from the onlookers who knew of his exploits in saving the regiment flag during the Battle of Fort Wagner. Booker T. Washington was the keynote, warning that the measure of what this monument stands for would not be realized until all are equal in this country. Until that time comes, he said, this monument will stand for the effort, not the victory complete. What these heroic souls of the 54th Regiment began, we must complete. I believe it has always been the responsibility of the National Park Service to give people hope, optimism, and voice. The very creation of a national park is an expression of faith in the future. It is a pact between generations, a promise from the past to the present to the future. The preservation of this memorial and the powerful stories found along the north slope of Beacon Hill is a collective expression of who we are as a people and where our values were forged. Extraordinary places like the Boston Common that boldly host this memorial embody certain unalienable rights and inspire our nation to succeed at becoming a more perfect union. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for those inspiring words. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our Chief of Environment, Energy, and Open Space, Chris Cook, who will say a few words on behalf of the city's commitment to the Shaw and then introduce the mayor.
Good morning, everyone. If there's a hub of the universe, it's Boston Common, right? Since 1634, Boston Common is the center of our community, it's the center of our city, it's the center of our Commonwealth, and it's the center of what we share as values. It's that centrality that makes this monument so significant. This is where we celebrate, this is where we recreate, and this is the place when there are threats to our civilization that we rally and that we demand no more. And here today, we're celebrating how powerful the imagery of this monument is in relation to this park and what it means to us. That's how significant we feel about the values of the Shaw 54th Memorial. Frederick Douglass said that the Civil War was not a mere contest over territory and dominion, but a contest of civilization against barbarism. That's what we believe in Boston. That's why here in the shadow of the State House, we put this monument to let the world know what we believe on Boston Common. It's an incredibly important space. It's not only America's first park, but it's our best park because it shows the best of us. And to make sure that that physical space reflects the best of us, Mayor Walsh over the past few years has invested not only in Tremont Street millions of dollars, or Boylston Street $700,000, the restoration of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, but next year our mayor is investing $28 million to work with the Friends of the Public Garden to completely renovate this park through a master plan. Ladies and gentlemen, the Mayor of Boston, Martin J. Walsh.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for all the work that you do as the Parks Commissioner, and we look forward to working with you as the new Chief of Environment in the City of Boston, and the great work that you can do. I want to thank everyone for being here today and coming out today. I just want to take a moment again just to introduce a few people. I think that's really important that we do. I want to thank Liz and all the Friends of the Public Garden for the incredible work they do and every day, but in particular as we move forward here in the Common, this is really going to continue to be a special place. And I want to thank you for all your input and advice and what you've done and for today. So thank you, Liz, and all the friends that are here. The National Park Service, it's a partnership. It truly is a partnership. I go to many events where Michael, we're together, or Chris is with Michael, and I want to thank the Park Service for what they do for the important monuments in our country that tell a story. And here in Boston, as Michael said earlier, the most important is right here. And I want to thank you for your service as well. I want to thank the Brigadier General who's with us today. And I want to thank the 54th. Thank you, 54th, in the back there. Memorial Day services, and I go to the Carter Post. The 54th has my back, so I want to thank you. I want to thank you for that. our commissioner, the City of Boston's Commissioner of Veterans Affairs, as well as Giselle Sterling. I want to thank you, Commissioner. And I want to thank the elected officials that are here. You know, the elected officials that work hard every day to make sure that we're able to have beautiful spaces like this in our city. And that's State Representative Byron Rushing, State Representative China Tyler. Thank you, Jay Livingstone, State Representative Jay Livingstone. We're in your district today. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. And City Councilor Eddie Flynn, and City Councilor Josh Sakem, whose district we're in today. So I want to thank. I think it's his district. All right. This was already said. This is one of the most important pieces of art in the United States of America. And we are deeply proud to have that piece here in the city of Boston. And we are just as proud of what that history it represents. It reminds us of what is possible in our city when we live by the highest ideals. It's an inspiration in our quest for equality today. The 54th Regiment, as you all know, was made up of black men. They either lived in Boston or they traveled to Boston, determined to fight for their people's freedom. They were supported by black and white Bostonians who were determined to do the right thing for our nation. They were mustered and trained in Rosendale, Massachusetts. As you heard earlier, they paraded here on Beacon Street on their way to war. Less than 2 months later, nearly half of the regiment were killed or wounded on the front lines in South Carolina. They fought with bravery and distinction, and they brought to life the highest purpose of the war, to make people free and to make our nation stronger by recognizing the talent and the courage of all its people. Boston is proud, but we can't rest in that pride. Instead, we must use that pride to set a standard for today and have conversations we need to reach that standard. That's what this memorial project will help us do. It's what the museum and the Heritage Trail helps us do. And it's key to our vision for arts and culture in Boston. We are in the very early stages of a new wave of public art in Boston, in on our neighborhoods as well as in downtown. We're planning a major memorial to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King right here on Boston Common, but also right there in Roxbury. We're talking to artists like Steve Locke about a memorial to the victims of the slave trade at Faneuil Hall. And we have new murals honoring African American culture in Dorchester and Roxbury. The restoration of this memorial will make sure it remains a visible centerpiece of our city's public art, where visitors see what we stand for, where children learn about their heritage, and where we hold our conversations that move us forward. So I am grateful for this partnership. It's a partnership of resources and a partnership of passion. Passion for our city, passion for our open space, passion for our public art. So we want to make sure that this memorial, in the spirit of the 54th Regiment, guides us in that work. And I just want to say one last thing as a former state representative. April 12th of 1997, I got elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives. When I got elected, we had a party and we were celebrating, and I went home and I couldn't sleep. So what I did was I got in my car and I drove up to Beacon Hill. And I parked in front of the State House. And to one side of me I looked and I realized I couldn't believe that a kid from Dorchester, son of immigrants, could get elected to the House of Representatives, and I was very excited. And I looked to the other side, and I wasn't thinking it that night, but I'm thinking it today when I'm sitting here. The men that portrayed in that piece of art are the ones who allowed me the opportunity to be elected as a state representative in our free society here in Boston. So I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to thank everybody who made this memorial possible. And I I look forward to coming back and unveiling. But unfortunately, as Liz said, there'll be fences around here as we're fixing the memorial. But I think when we're unveiling, there'll be fences around here as we're fixing the common. So we'll figure it out later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. So now we are going to have a ceremony of signing our Memorandum of Understanding. It's to underscore our commitment to this restoration, to the conversations, to not resting on any laurels that we might have laid over the years, but really provoking us for the next year and a half about how we can be that more perfect union and more perfect city. So I'd like to invite our partners, and I'd like to invite our elected officials who are here too come up as well, and we'll be signing this Memorandum of Understanding. Thank you all for coming. We're so glad that you could be here to witness this, and be aware that we will be posting our events, so stay tuned on all that's going to be happening over the next year and a half. Thank you.